Welcome to the Independent Rep Podcast, the podcast for medical sales reps, distributors, and growth-minded manufacturers who want to succeed in today's changing market. Hosted by John Wilson, former OR rep and now medical device recruiter, this show dives into what's really working out in the field, from deal making to distributor dynamics and everything in between. If you're building your career or your company in medtech, you're in the right place. All right, so today we have Dennis Cassell. He is the Chief Commercial Officer of Gyder Surgical in the U.S. So Dennis, to start out with, you've been a veteran in medical sales. Can you kind of give us a little bit of your story?
Sure. Well, thanks, John. I really appreciate you having me here and happy to share my story. So I started off in orthopedics in Dallas, Texas in 1993, working for a small independent distributor who carried a whole host of different lines. So we sold total joints, we sold trauma, we sold sports medicine, a lot of companies you would actually recognize that are big companies today that were small back in 1993. And it was kind of interesting the way I got into it. I had been in sales for other types of things in other industries right out of school. And one day I got a call from a headhunter, and the headhunter said, "How do you feel about the sight of blood?" And I was a little bit intrigued by that. And so I got into the interviews and got to meet the distributor, and I got to understand what the company did. And I was hooked. I was really interested in it. I loved being in the operating room. I loved the patient care aspect of it. So once I started down that pathway, I was kind of hooked on it. I worked for this small independent distributor from 1993 until 96, at which time I went to work for Johnson & Johnson. So moved the family down to Austin, Texas, and had the Austin, Texas territory for J&J Orthopedics. And then ultimately J&J bought DePuy. And when that happened, which was in 1998, I decided I wanted to get into some other commercial parts of the business and specifically into marketing. So I packed up the family and we moved to Warsaw, Indiana, and took a role in marketing. And that turned out to be great. Worked in many different roles, primarily in hips and in shoulders, but I had always wanted to get back into sales and into sales management. So that happened in 2009. I took a role out in the field in the western part of the U.S. as an area vice president, and then ultimately made it up to vice president of sales and marketing for the joint reconstruction business for the U.S. And did that for about 4 years. So it was a great ride, a lot of great experiences within J&J, and I really had a good time there. When I left J&J, I went into the startup world, and that's where I am now, and it's been really great. It's very different from J&J. It's very different from the big corporate environment, but it's been a great change. So currently with Gyder Surgical and having a great time.
Awesome. Yeah, and I want to get into Gyder. Let me go back to, because you've been on both sides at this point, being W2 with Johnson & Johnson, massive company, and then you also were a distributor when you started out, or worked for a distributor.
Yeah, as a 1099 when I started, correct.
Yeah, and so I've always been curious because I've never done the big corporation roles. I've always seen it as kind of best-in-class training, best-in-class support versus kind of winging it in the distributor world. How would you characterize the major differences?
That's a great question. And I don't know that I would necessarily say that one is better than the other. I just think that they are very different. So if I look back at my experience in the 1099 world when I started, you're right. We didn't have all of the training, all of the support. Much of that we had to take into our own hands. Also, as you know, of course, as a 1099, you're responsible for paying your taxes and you're responsible for your benefits and taking care of all of that stuff. So it is a very different world, but there's an upside to that. You get a lot of independence. You get to do a lot of things that you can't do when you're an employee of a big organization. And if I pivot and I compare that to J&J, J&J had world-class training, certification for reps. It had fantastic benefits, which I still enjoy to this day, by the way. And it was a great experience as well. I consider myself fortunate that I had an opportunity to see both sides of that. But again, going back to my original comment, I don't know that there's one that's better than the other. I think it just kind of depends on the individual that's interested in getting in this industry and what they want to do and where they want to go. The one thing I will say about the big company experience is that lots of doors open. So if you want to go into marketing, if you want to go into commercial operations, whatever you want to do, you do have a lot of opportunities within the big organization. And I think that's a little bit harder sometimes to find as a 1099 independent.
Yeah, absolutely. It's non-existent most of the time. That's very good and really good underlining of those differences. So now you took your experience from Johnson & Johnson, and I mean, you've gone into the startup world. Did you go first into Gyder, or did you have another stop?
When I left J&J, as you would imagine, I had a non-compete and a non-solicitation agreement. And so I had to sit on the sideline for a little while. So during that time, I started my own consulting company and started doing some consulting with startup companies that were trying to commercialize products in the US. And ultimately, that's how I got connected with Gyder. So the CEO is Sujit DK. He's a friend of mine. I've known him for a long time through our J&J connection. And I started consulting with him to help him get involved with a surgeon network that could do some early work as we push towards FDA clearance. So that was really how I first got involved with Gyder. And then ultimately, when we received FDA clearance, Sujit offered me a role full-time, and I decided to take it just because I'm excited about the product. I'm excited about how it's positioned and so forth, and just made a lot of sense for me personally.
Awesome. Yeah. So tell us what Gyder is.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, Gyder is an Australian company. It was originally founded by an aircraft engineer who had experience at Qantas Airlines, and he had a lot of experience with accelerometers and gyroscopes. And he was looking for ways to apply that technology in the medical field. And ultimately, he got involved with the Australian medical device community, and he founded Gyder. And the first product is a hip navigation product. And so the goal with this product was to make something that is easy to use, that is fast, that is simple and cost effective, and provides excellent data for hip navigation. So that was really what caught my eye. I look at the market and the way it's changing now, and we see the site of care changing from acute care hospitals to ambulatory surgery centers and to hospital outpatient departments. And there's a strong need for something in the technology realm that's fast, easy, and inexpensive. And that's exactly what Gyder does. So in a nutshell, it's a hip navigation system that is specifically designed for anterior approach in a low-cost environment. So it's neat technology, and I was excited to get involved with it.
Yeah, I've looked at it. It's very cool. Handheld, doesn't take up room in the OR.
Exactly.
Not a big capital outlay for
Exactly.
the ASC, I'm imagining. What does it solve? Like, what's the pain point that it's directly solving?
So if you look at the pain point that it's solving, it really comes down to what surgeons want in hip replacement surgery. So we've seen across the industry that in knees in particular, there's been a rapid adoption of technology, whether it's handheld or whether it's robotics, but not so much in hips. And I think many surgeons will tell you that robotics are a little bit more challenging in the hip realm. And what they're looking for is navigation. And so what Gyder allows you to do is enter that realm and provide that kind of technology at a low cost and at a very low barrier to entry. So if you compare it to some of the other systems on the market, ours is handheld. It takes about a minute to do registration, requires no images, no pins, no cameras. So it's very easy and doesn't really disrupt the surgeon's workflow. So it allows us to provide technology that's simple at a low cost. Now, if you look at the unmet need and why we need this, if you look at the US healthcare system and you look at the number of revisions that are done every year because of malpositioned implants, the total dollar impact of that on the US system is over $2 billion. And so Gyder, one of our goals is to reduce that number by helping surgeons put the cup in accurately during primary surgery.
Yeah, I was about to ask if it had kind of the same results as knees, where there's just this massive need to get it right. And it's a big problem out there in the market right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we think that this is a good platform for continued development. So we're starting with hip. We will expand, adding more features, adding additional joints and so forth as we get established in the US market. But right now, we felt that there was a big need in hip specifically, and that's the reason we've started there.
Okay. And so how are you kind of spearheading adoption with this? That's basically your task right now,
Yeah,
right?
that's right. So it's a great question, and there are a lot of ways to look at it. And for us as a startup, we're trying to be effective within our budget. We don't have the budget of J&J or Zimmer or Smith & Nephew. And so naturally for us, using distributors and independent 1099 reps was the way that we wanted to go. It allows access to reps that are typically trained already in orthopedics. They understand anatomy. They understand the procedures. Oftentimes they're carrying a total joint line already. And this, I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but Gyder is compatible with any total joint company's implants. And so it just is kind of a natural fit for what we do. The product fits into their call pattern. And again, when you couple that with what we're seeing in the industry as cases move towards ambulatory surgery centers, it just makes a lot of sense. So back to your original question, our initial strategy is to go through independent distributors and independent 1099 reps. And then as we continue to expand and build the company in the US, we'll add additional resources and additional support.
Okay. So in terms of that, I'm imagining the facility purchases kind of the hand device, the handful of tools that are used during the case. And then is there a per case cost? Do you want to get into that? You can tell me no.
I'll give you just the high level. One of the things that's important to us as a startup company is that we want to be nimble and we want to be flexible and we want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our customers. So we have a variety of different models to get the product into the hands of surgeons, and we're really willing to be flexible with whatever the needs are of that individual hospital or ASC. So I think based on what we're seeing in the industry now, I would expect that in most cases, the reusable instruments will be placed on consignment within a facility. And then the single-use kit, the disposables, would be purchased per case. So that's the basic model that we've got. But if we have an account that wants to purchase the system outright, of course, we would do that. And we have some other options available as well. But I think looking at the cost pressures that they have in that market and what they're trying to deal with, particularly in the ASCs, the consignment model is the one that's really going to resonate.
And so main geographies that you're looking for 1099s?
That's a great question also. And so we're being targeted in our launch right now. And so we're trying to look at the geographies across the US where we see, number one, the most anterior approach surgery. And then number two, kind of overlay that with ASC usage because we think that's our ideal target. And so if you look at the data on where surgeries are done, it won't surprise you. There's a lot done in the Northeast in New York and that area. There's a lot done in Florida, the Chicago metro area. Then you've kind of got Texas, Louisiana, and then California. So those are really the big markets. But ultimately, we want nationwide coverage. And so I'm open to relationships with sales people all over the country. But that's kind of our initial approach as we get out of the gate.
Yeah, anterior hip, ASCs, and lots of cases.
You got it.
Pretty good strike zone. Yeah. So in terms of like, when you look at a rep, and I imagine some of this is your J&J background, what are good qualities that a 99 rep brings to the table for you?
Yeah, that's another good question. What I'm looking for is a rep that, number one, is a consummate professional. I want someone who understands the industry, who understands the products that they offer to their customers, and that has good relationships with customers so that they have an opportunity to introduce this technology. So I'm looking for professional salespeople. Number two, I'm looking for focus on our product. I know that oftentimes independent reps carry multiple lines, and so they're not going to give 100% of their time to any one line, but I'm looking for focus where it makes sense. And that happens with a business plan. And so when we sign on a new rep or a new distributor, I want to understand how they're going to take the product to market, who they're going to take it to, and then how we can support them in that effort. So really, I think to sum it up, I'm looking for professionalism and I'm looking for attention to the product.
Are you looking for groups at all that have maybe, W-2s underneath them or across the board, just this?
Yeah, I'm open to all of those things. So I'm open to independent 1099 reps. I'm open to distributors. I'm open to groups, as you said. Again, I think it depends on the structure of the group and what kind of attention and focus they can give to the product. But overall, we're very flexible in that regard.
What kind of training what's the training time frame when you sign somebody on?
Yeah, another good question. So we've developed training materials internally that, number one, focus on the sales team. And then we also have a separate training that would really be more of an in-service for a hospital or for a physician. Right now, as a small company, everything is very hands-on. So if a new rep or distributor signs up with us, we would come out and do that training in person. We would be there for first cases to make sure that everything goes well. And so it's at this point, it's something that we're handling on a case-by-case basis. But I believe in training, and then maybe that goes back to my J&J days as well. I think training is critically important. I think our reps need to have not only the training, but the resources necessary to support a surgery every time they're in there. And so that is something that we will provide to each and every one of our associates.
Okay. And there's always a couple of questions that the 1099, my relationships, they always ask me if I'm presenting a product, right?
Yep.
GPOs, who's using it now, and then we'll leave the point system off the table for a while. I'll let you take that offline with those guys. But
how's the adoption going so far? What's the reception been?
Yeah, so we're early stage. So we haven't really entered the GPO world yet. We've really been focusing more on the ASCs because, as you know, they're often physician owned or at least partially physician owned. And as a result, that process of getting a product in for use is much easier. We do have some requests for some GPO contracts, and we're beginning to work on that, but it's just not an area that we have played in yet. As far as adoption, as I said earlier, the company is Australian. So we've done multiple cases in Australia. We've also done cases in India. We're looking to do the first surgery in the US in about 3 to 4 weeks from the date of this podcast. So we're very close to doing the first surgery, but I don't have US experience yet.
Okay.
So we've got surgeons identified. We have surgeons waiting to use the product as soon as we have it in the warehouse, which is all beginning to happen here over the next couple of weeks.
That's pretty exciting. So now you're
for sure.
are you enjoying this startup phase coming from Johnson & Johnson?
I'm actually loving it. It's great because you wear many hats, and in a big company, whether it's J&J or whether it's any of the other big companies, they tend to get very siloed by the different functions and what you can and can't do. So I'm really enjoying getting involved in the different parts of the business, but I'm also really enjoying being able to make quick decisions that are impactful and move quickly. And so that's, I think, kind of unique to the startup world, particularly when you compare it to a larger company. So overall, yeah, I'm really enjoying it. It's been fun. And honestly, it reminds me a little bit of when I was a 1099 rep in Texas back in the 90s. You know, in those days, you kind of make your own future and you decide how you're going to spend your time, where you're going to invest your resources, and then try to deliver the best outcome. And that's very similar to what we're doing here.
Yeah. Did you ever go to the old Parkland in Dallas?
I did go to the old Parkland. Yeah, actually, my mother used to be an operating room nurse at Parkland in the 1960s. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And so fun. Yeah, I started my career doing that area.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I'm going to ask a question because I see a lot of people from like the big companies go and they do startups. Mm-hmm. So a lot of Medtronic and a lot of Johnson & Johnson alum, I'll call them, go and they bring their footprint or they bring their training, their background to these startups. What are those strengths that you think that they're bringing to these startup companies?
It's a great question. I think the first thing that everybody tends to think about when somebody leaves a big company and then goes to a startup is that they're going to bring their network of customers and people with them. And while that is definitely part of it, and I've certainly leaned on my network where I can, I think that's only a small part of the story. I think what really makes the difference is, number one, getting involved with the right company. Startups are a lot like new restaurants. 90% of them fail. So I think you need to be careful about picking the right startup or starting one in the right space. Number two, you need to be passionate about what you're doing. So it has to be the right product. You have to love it. You have to want to do it. And then number three, the thing that kills most startups is that they run out of funding. And so I think getting tapped into the right circles and getting involved with the right institutions and organizations that can help you with funding makes a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and then because your experience is also it tracks so interestingly in the orthopedics world with DePuy and Johnson & Johnson and Warsaw. Give us a view of that, the orthopedic world from the 90s when it kind of exploded and and then before you had all the consolidation.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about that. And I've thought about that a lot recently. And when I started as a rep in the 90s, I think the major things that were different were, number one, there weren't as many barriers to entry. Hospitals were much more willing to allow people to bring in new technology. Pricing was very different. So we saw very little discounting on implants. Distributors were able to provide a higher commission rate. And so as a result, for someone that was a 1099 rep, you could make a really good living concentrating on a smaller area and a smaller number of customers. And so that allowed you to provide a very high level of service, to develop great relationships, and to still be very successful. If you fast forward 20 years, 25 years, keep going down the line, we now have huge pressure on pricing. So everything is heavily discounted. The cost of doing business has become much higher for distributors. Commission rates have come down. And as a result, I think now the independent rep has gone from a small area to a huge area with a huge number of customers. And it just makes it difficult to stay connected the way that we used to be able to do. Now, there's some good things too about, I think, the current state. Back in the 90s, when I was a rep, I did everything. I didn't have any support at all. At FedEx early in the morning, picking up trays. I was putting trays together, covering cases, cleaning trays, delivering them for the next day. I was constantly running around with logistics, and it made it hard to actually find time to sell. If you contrast that with today, there are more resources. There are case coverage reps, depending on the company you work for and how your arrangement is, but there are case coverage reps. There are departments that do billing. There are, people that can help you with deliveries and all of that sort of thing. So I think one of the keys to success in today's world versus then is taking advantage of all of those resources that you've got and not trying to do everything. Because I think most of the successful reps today are spread so thin that it's impossible to try to do everything. And so I certainly think you can still have tremendous success in an orthopedic independent role. You just have to approach it differently than we did in the 90s.
Yeah, I think a lot of people listening to this they'd have a lot of similarities with going to FedEx in the morning, putting trays together. That still definitely is going on, and it's still a big complaint. But you do see a lot of software that's being developed right now to solve that for the independent rep.
Absolutely. Yeah, everything was manual, of course, in the 90s. I think the software is definitely helpful, and the planning tools, all of that stuff is great. And I think, again, the reps who are successful are the ones that take advantage of those technologies.
I agree with that. Where do you see some of these trends going? Anterior hips, that came around in the, I guess, early 2000s.
Early 2000s.
And took over. You don't need to make a call like that. That's a tough one. But any kind of trends technology wise that you see in orthopedics or in medicine?
It's a great question. So I do see the adoption of anterior hips continuing to grow. So right now in the US, it's a little under 60% anterior. There are still big pockets of posterior, and there are people who will never leave that, and that's fine. But I see that continuing. But I think, like everything else that we see going on in the world right now, everybody's wondering what we're going to do with AI. And so I think we're going to see continued adoption of AI in the industry. When I look at what I'm seeing right now and the people that I'm talking to, the primary place we're seeing it now is in preoperative planning, but then also we're beginning to see it implemented live in the OR. And so I think coming up with ways that technologies can collaborate with one another and utilize AI to drive better outcomes is going to be the place where I think we see a lot of development. We've also seen just in the last few years the development of a registry in the United States, which I think is great because it gives us data to feed into the AI. And, AI is only as good as the data that goes into it. And we're now starting to get more sound data that we can use to make good clinical decisions. So I think we're going to see that. If I were to kind of guess what else we're going to see, I think smart implants in one form or another are going to continue to be developed. I know there are several that have been recently launched or are pending launch. And so I think that's a very interesting space, and I think we'll continue to see development there. And then as usual, the orthopedic industry is one where even though we have very high success rates with hips and knees, we continue to work on materials and other things that can make an implant last longer. So we're going to continue to see that sort of investment as well.
Yeah. Okay, very cool. And then so going to kind of Gyder's core technology of the accelerometer, what's the other part of it?
Gyroscope.
Gyroscope.
Yep.
Yeah, I've seen some of those get used or some technology coming out with other joints. Can you talk a little bit about the future of Gyder?
Yeah. So first of all, one of the things that we're excited about is that when the company was originally founded and we started working with the technologies, we patented a lot of the things that we have. So we currently have 41 patents on our technology. We have more that are pending. And so we believe in investing in the technology so that we can take it to future applications. As I said earlier in the podcast here, I think one of the things that really sets us apart is that we don't need to use images. We don't need to use pins, and we don't need to use cameras. So what that really means is that you've got to have a way for the device to figure out where it is in space and where the patient is in space, right? That's the tricky part. And so we have that down for anterior hip. And as I said, we've got posterior coming. We have some other things that are coming. And so when I look at our future development, I want to take that design philosophy forward. So any product that we launch, I want to be simple. I want it to be cost effective. And I want it to be as minimally invasive as possible. Surgeons routinely tell me that they don't want to put bone pins in the pelvis or bone pins in the femur. They don't like the added time. They don't like the expense. They don't like the risk of pin tract infections, all of those things that we know about. And so that's kind of our core philosophy. We don't want to overcomplicate things. And there's a trade-off there, because by keeping it simple, there may be some features that we actually decide not to develop because they would add too much complexity. So we're trying to find that balance between being simple and effective and not offering so much technology that it makes things complicated.
That makes sense. How much surgeon in Australia when this thing was getting developed?
Mhm.
Tell us about the surgeon input on that.
So I think the surgeon input was really critical in shaping what the product is today. So the original founder of the company had an idea on the technology, but he just didn't know where to take it. And he ended up getting involved with some investors that kind of pointed him towards medical device. And they identified acetabular cup placement as the most critical thing that they need and the most critical need for navigation. Our involvement with surgeons in the development of the product and the features has always been critical. And I think it's important to have surgeons from different countries and from different backgrounds that do different approaches and have all of them provide us input so that we can continue to develop things that are relevant for the market. I think to answer your question, the surgeons have been with us all the way through the development, and they've played a critical role in shaping what the product has become. So I think the development process for this didn't necessarily follow the traditional orthopedic route that you'd see for a hip or a knee, but we've never cut the surgeons out of it, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah. I'm excited to see the U.S. adoption and see the
I am too.
ASC reception of this. So
it's hard for the wife and grandkids walking by in the background there.
It's post-COVID. I think everyone just automatically you could have shown up with a cat head and everyone would have been all right. So, all right, Dennis. Well, thank you. If you're a 1099 rep, how would they get in touch with you?
So my email address we're a small company. It's Dennis at Gydersurgical.com. So Gyder is Gyder.
Okay. Awesome.
So I'd love to talk to anybody who's interested in carrying the product or interested in finding out more about it. And we are happy to travel around the country and meet with customers and meet with prospective reps and distributors. So I appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk about it.
Very cool. Well, thank you, Dennis. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, John.
Thanks for listening to the Independent Rep Podcast. If you got value from today's episode, please follow, share, and leave a review. To connect with John or learn more about succeeding in medical device sales, visit theindependentrep.com. Until next time, keep grinding, keep learning, and stay independent.